How can we place our trust in anything this Labour government promises when their track record speaks volumes about their reliability? After securing a massive parliamentary majority in an election where voter turnout reflected widespread disillusionment. With our political establishment, Keir Starmer immediately began implementing policies that were conspicuously absent from his campaign manifesto. The winter fuel allowance controversy perfectly exemplifies this pattern of governance. The government decided that pensioners earning more than £11,000 annually would lose their heating support. Consider that figure for a moment. £11,000 represents barely enough to survive on, particularly for elderly citizens who have contributed to society throughout their working lives and can no longer generate income through employment. This policy decision was so fundamentally flawed that even the government recognized its mistake. Starmer eventually acknowledged the need for course correction, stating that he wanted people to feel the benefits of government measures and ensuring more pensioners would remain eligible for winter fuel support. The reversal came as no surprise to anyone paying attention. Similarly, the government performed another complete reversal on welfare reforms that would have stripped benefits from genuinely sick and disabled individuals. Once again, these changes received no mention in their electoral manifesto. The Prime Minister later claimed they engaged in constructive discussions with colleagues who made powerful representations, resulting in what he described as a balanced package that represented common-sense governance. The grooming gang scandal provides another clear example of policy inadequacy followed by inevitable reversal. When evidence emerged of systematic abuse occurring in 50 locations across the country, the need for a national inquiry became undeniably obvious. Initially, the government attempted to deflect by appointing Louise Casey to conduct a limited review. However, public pressure forced them to acknowledge that a comprehensive statutory inquiry was essential. Starmer defended his handling of the situation by referencing his 15-year history of addressing these issues, including changes he made to prosecution rules during his tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions. Nevertheless, the delay in establishing a proper inquiry reflected poor initial judgment rather than principled leadership. These reversals occurred within a single month, highlighting a government that clearly failed to think through the implications of their policies before implementation. Despite Labour traditionally positioning itself as the party that champions those in need, they voted these problematic measures through Parliament using their substantial majority. These were deliberate policy decisions that were obviously wrong from the outset. The most intriguing aspect of Starmer's leadership came with his Island of Strangers speech, which many observers compared to Enoch Powell's controversial rhetoric. In that address, Starmer warned against Britain becoming an island of strangers rather than a nation moving forward together. He criticized an immigration system that seemed designed to permit abuse, encouraged businesses to import lower-paid workers instead of investing in young British people, and operated on premises that politicians sold to the public under false pretenses. However, Starmer later expressed deep regret about this speech to The Observer, claiming that neither he nor his speechwriters understood the historical connection to Enoch Powell's use of the word strangers. This admission suggests he either failed to read the speech beforehand or certainly did not write it personally. Many political observers suspect Starmer is attempting to capture support from Reform Party voters, given his apparent obsession with Nigel Farage. In recent speeches, he cannot resist mentioning Farage repeatedly, describing him as someone stuck in the past and making jokes about Clapton and horse racing. He characterizes Farage as a wolf in Wall Street clothing, claiming, "Reform presents itself as the party of patriotism while allegedly supporting Putin and criticizing British armed forces online." If you find these political contradictions as concerning as many voters do, make sure to subscribe for more analysis of how our political leaders handle these critical issues. The frequency of Starmer's references to Farage has become almost comical, with some speeches featuring the reform leaders named dozens of times. This obsessive focus raises questions about the Prime Minister's priorities and strategic thinking. Given this pattern of policy reversals, broken manifesto promises, and confused messaging, it hardly seems surprising that public confidence in Starmer's leadership continues to decline. The government has not even completed its first year in office, yet already demonstrates a concerning pattern of incompetence and indecision. Political commentators across the spectrum acknowledge that policy reversals occur regularly in modern politics. Previous governments, including those led by Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and Liz Truss, all implemented significant U-turns on major policies. However, the speed and frequency of Labour's reversals, particularly on policies absent from their manifesto, raises unique concerns about their mandate and competence. The winter fuel allowance controversy particularly illustrates the government's disconnect from practical reality. Removing heating support from pensioners earning barely enough to survive represents a fundamental misunderstanding of economic hardship. The policy risked creating a public health crisis as elderly people faced impossible choices between heating and eating during winter months. Similarly, the proposed welfare reforms threatened to punish genuinely disabled individuals, while potentially missing those who might abuse the system. The government's retreat from these proposals suggested they had not properly consulted disability advocates or considered the real-world impact on vulnerable populations. The grooming gang inquiry delay demonstrated another form of political tone deafness. With evidence of systematic abuse spanning multiple locations and affecting countless victims, the need for comprehensive investigation was immediately apparent to any reasonable observer. The government's initial reluctance to commit to a full statutory inquiry suggested either poor judgment or misplaced priorities. Some defenders argue that policy reversals demonstrate responsive leadership and willingness to listen to public concerns. They suggest that adapting to changing circumstances and acknowledging mistakes represents strength rather than weakness in democratic governance. However, critics contend that these reversals reveal a government that failed to properly prepare for office despite having 14 years in opposition to develop coherent policies. They argue that hiding significant policy changes from voters during the election campaign undermines democratic accountability and public trust. The Island of Strangers speech controversy adds another dimension to concerns about Starmer's leadership style. His subsequent disavowal of rhetoric that initially appeared central to his political positioning suggests either poor judgment or political opportunism. Before we conclude this analysis, remember to subscribe if you want to stay informed about how these political developments continue to unfold and affect ordinary citizens. The broader pattern emerging from Labour's first year suggests a government struggling to transition from opposition tactics to governing responsibilities. Their approach appears reactive rather than strategic, responding to immediate pressures, rather than implementing a coherent long-term vision. Whether this represents growing pains that will resolve with experience or fundamental problems with the government's approach remains to be seen. However, the early evidence suggests significant challenges ahead for a leadership team that promised change but appears uncertain about what that change should entail. The ultimate test will be whether Labour can develop more consistent and thoughtful governance that maintains public confidence while delivering meaningful improvements to citizens' lives. Their track record so far provides little reason for optimism among those hoping for competent and principled leadership.